Yeah, well, they usually...
The content
Okay,
of
nice.
this meeting is being sent to a third party.
Setting up your... Done. Redirecting you to YouTube. This is insane.
Yeah, I got a message popped up on my screen. It says content of this meeting is being sent to a third party. By staying in this
Okay, hang
meeting,
on. We're
you
in
can...
live here now. Caleb, where are you? Are you here?
I'm here.
Just hang on a sec, because this is... Got it. Okay, just a minute. Yeah, we're in live here now. Caleb, where are you? Are you here?
Now I'm hearing us talk in the background.
Yeah, so I'm now just actually trying to take all of that down.
So
Wow.
did you get my message that this meeting is being sent to a third party?
I didn't get that, no.
Let me read it to you. Popped up on my screen. It said this meeting is being sent to a third party. By staying in this meeting, you consent to sharing your information, including audio and video. Users with access to the third party service can watch or share content with others.
Okay, I think that's part of the recording. I think we're live now. I do believe we're live now.
This
Okay.
is live.
Wow. Yeah, I think we're live. Okay, guys, this has just been the craziest time. And I'm going to check because while we're on Zoom, I actually can't see the comment section. So just give me a minute, please. This is just crazy at the moment. We try to go on to... Jerry couldn't get onto StreamYard. And I've had to now to go to record live on Zoom. I've had to go via a whole lot of other channels. So I just want to make sure that all of this, we actually are recording right now. I'm not actually sure if it's showing. Wow. This is crazy.
There should be something on Zoom that tells you that you're recording.
It says to me, it says on YouTube that I'm host live on YouTube. Okay. It says that I'm live on YouTube, and we have been now. Okay, I'm gonna hope like hell that everything is fine because it's not showing on my. It's actually not showing on the YouTube page. So I'm hoping that it's happened, that it's all going live. Let me actually I want to just quickly send Morné a message. And just see if we can say, sorry guys, if you are there.
Oh, no problem. Now I could always send you a Zoom link also.
It's live on Solutions.
So I'm hoping that it's happened, that it's all going live. Is it on Solutions? And just see if we can say, sorry guys, if you are there.
No problem. Now I could always send you a Zoom.
Is that on Solutions, Caleb?
It is.
How did it get onto Solutions? I mean, that's my second channel. We can do it on Solutions for sure, but it's just absolutely bizarre that it's on there and not on Aquarius Rising Africa. Wow. Okay, well, let's go ahead anyway, because then what I'll do afterwards, I will just actually share it on both channels. So, good evening, everybody. Happy Saturday. Wow, what a crazy, crazy day. And I just want to say welcome to Caleb as well as Jerry. Really good to have you guys here today and talking about, schizophrenia and what are the voices in the heads, people, the schizophrenics' heads really about. Jerry, you've been on our show a couple of times, which I really enjoyed, and not only that, just I've watched a few of your other interviews as well. Super interesting. Caleb, with you obviously having a lot of information on what that really is about, I think this could make for some very interesting conversation. But Jerry, if you wouldn't mind just maybe just giving an introduction again to what you know, your experience with these types of situations, and then I think Caleb can fill in and just see where he comes from in the situation.
Okay. Well, I've been working on the front lines of mental health here in the United States for close to 45 years, probably over that. I worked at the biggest state psychiatric hospital on the planet back in the 70s. I spent 18 years working in the psychology department of a large state prison. I worked in mental health centers. I spent the last 10 years of my career working psych crisis in emergency rooms in big hospitals around Tucson. I've been in virtually every type of mental health treatment facility that there is in the U.S. And the whole time I was studying the voices that schizophrenics heard. First, when I started work at the big psychiatric hospital, I had no idea what they were. I mean, we were taught in graduate school that they were hallucinations. And that was it. They didn't go into any details. It's clear that they made no studies of what these voices were. So I went to work believing that they were hallucinations and that I thought they were like word cabbage, or word salad, that they just made no sense. But after a while, watching patients, talking to these things, carrying on conversations with these voices, those conversations were coherent. They were in full sentences. They were arguing with them. They were fighting with them. They were cussing them. They were talking to them. And all this was happening in full sentences. So I'm like, it's not word salad. I mean, it's not just crazy stuff like a hallucination, which are random. They're just all over the place. Hallucinations don't make any sense. They don't run any patterns. So when I got to the big psychiatric hospital, the big state hospital, I found that virtually everybody there believed that these voices were hallucinations. Not a single one of the staff was interested in what they were saying to these patients. And it was clear after a short while that these voices were driving their behavior in a bad way, in a self-destructive way. And it was consistent. So I started asking these patients, well, what are these voices telling you? And they didn't want to talk about it. And, looking at their situation, they have nothing to gain by talking about those voices. I mean, they lost their friends telling them, hey, I'm hearing these demons or voices, and they're telling me all this horrible stuff. Then they tell their parents drag them into a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist pronounces them mentally ill and tells them they have to take these toxic pills for the rest of their lives that just turn them into zombies. So there's no positive outcome for schizophrenics to be talking about these voices. And on top of that, I found out later that the voices don't want them talking about them either. And they will punish these patients for speaking about them. Okay.
Right.
So there's no positive benefit. On top of that, at the psychiatric hospital, psychologists and counselors were being used as spies for psychiatry. So if any of these patients went off their meds and started acting out, it was our duty to turn them into psychiatry, because at that time, that's the only thing they had to control their behavior were those toxic medications, which would knock them out and had horrible side effects. So they didn't like taking these pills. So it took me about a year to figure out how to talk to the schizophrenics about their voices. And I got like one little piece at a time. And every time I got a piece, the next schizophrenic, I would say, well, I know this much about them. What else can you tell me? And after a while, they saw that I wasn't just being a snitch, that I was really interested in learning what these voices had to say. So somewhere down the line, as I was questioning one of these guys, the voices got uppity, and they got the patient to go to psychiatry and tell them that, this guy was asking questions about their voices and it upset him and he didn't like it. The next thing I knew, I was out in front of the psychiatrist in his office being told that the voices are hallucinations. They're not real. You're reinforcing them by asking these patients questions about them, and you're making them worse. And I'm like, this guy's out of it. You couldn't respond to them. I mean, the psychiatrists have egos that just won't quit. Right.
Right.
So I got a warning, stop. Okay, so I had to be very careful from that point on about, I couldn't push them too hard. I couldn't ask them too many questions at once. You know, maybe a year or two later, it happened again down the line. I was given a warning by another psychiatrist. So it's interesting that psychiatry doesn't want you even looking into what these voices are or how they behave. It's like a gut feel they have. Now, you know, at the state hospital, they had a reason for that because they were being beat up at a rate that higher than any other staff in the hospital, except for attendants that spend 24 hours a day around these schizophrenic people. But the assault rate on psychiatrists was extremely high, and it wasn't worse. You know, it wasn't anywhere near that of any of the other staff except attendants. I mean, they weren't beating up on psychologists or counselors or psych nurses or regular doctors. It appeared that they were targeting psychiatrists. And on top of that, you know, that what puzzled me is that psychiatrists were only spending 15 to 20 minutes with them a month. You know, they ask them, how's the meds doing? But, you know, you're hearing voices. And if they were hearing voices, they drug them more. And then they let them go. And yet, with spending less time with these patients than any of the other staff, they were being assaulted at a much higher rate. And it took me 7 years to find out why that was. And it turned out, to make things short, turned out that the voices don't like those drugs. Okay, they calm the patient down. The voices don't want them calmed down. They want them upset. They want them paranoid. They want them negative. They want them fearful. They want them at a low frequency. And then I thought that what happened also was there was a one-to-one correspondence between the voices appearing and attacking these people and their energy levels dropping to almost zero. And that was consistent. Every time the voices showed up, the energy level would disappear. I thought that was due to the negative content of these voices. I mean, they're just persistently and consistently negative. They tell the patients, you're no good, you're rotten, you're evil, you're no good, nobody likes you, you're worthless, you're stupid. I mean, any rotten thing you can think of, these voices are telling these poor souls. And, you know, they're being told from the time they were kids that any thought that shows up in your mind belongs to you. So here's these poor patients listening to this dribble and believing that it's them. It's them talking to themselves. They had no concept that these voices were coming in from another place and were separate from them. Okay. So if they listened to them and they believed what they said, they became them. So they became nasty. They became violent. They became irrational, just like the voices. So, of course, psychiatry's out of this. They have nothing to do with the voices. They have no interest in them. They have no interest in finding anything out about them. They've never done any research into them, nor have I ever seen a researcher on the front lines in any institution I've ever worked to. All this garbage is coming out of the universities and professors in the universities and big pharma. You know, any research on schizophrenia. It's not coming from the front line. It's not coming from objective researchers. It's coming from brainwashed professors and researchers who are controlled by big pharma in the universities. The universities pretty much control, the big pharma pretty much controls everything the universities print. And if they don't like something, they see that it doesn't get printed. They won't fund research that doesn't highlight drugs. You know, they're making $14.7 billion a year selling individually antipsychotics and antidepressant drugs. They have no interest in these people recovering. They have interest in selling drugs. That's it. They could care less about these people. You know? And there's other therapies out there right now that do a lot better job of treating psychological problems than these drugs do. These drugs cure nothing. You know, and one of them is the MACE energy method. We could talk about that later. But it was very clear to me that these voices were independent entities. And the way that came about was I started finding patterns that these voices ran. And the very first one was that they were consistently negative. They never said anything positive. And if they did, it was only to circle around and stab the patient in the back later. So it was always rotten stuff. My first question became, why aren't they random like regular hallucinations? Why aren't they all over the place? You know, why aren't some positive, some negative, some neutral? Why are they just all over? Why aren't they all over the place like regular hallucinations if they're hallucinations? But they weren't. The first pattern was a consistently negative. The next question was, what held them on a consistently negative pattern? How come they didn't drift off of that negative pattern? You know, why were
Right.
they consistently and persistently and irretrievably negative? All right. Second pattern I found was that they were anti-religious. They didn't like the patient going to church. They didn't like them reading the Bible. They reacted to the 23rd Psalm like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. They hated preachers. The schizophrenic patients wouldn't go to ice cream socials that the chaplains were holding. And I noticed that their bedstands had negative books like war stories and murder mysteries and negative type stuff. Yeah. So I started asking them questions about that. You know, what did the voices do when they went to church? And I had no shortage of schizophrenics at the state hospital. There were plenty of them. So it turned out there were 3 different classifications. That's if the voices were weak and they went to church, the voices would shut up. They'd just go silent. If they were moderate strength, they would kick up and they would try to block whatever the preacher was saying. They would interfere with it. So they didn't want the person listening. They'd say stuff like, Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you? You know, stuff like that. They would just babble on. So the patient couldn't hear what the preacher was saying. If they were very strong, they would drive the person out of the church. He would just get up and run out. Okay. So there were 3 classifications there depending on the strength of the voices. Okay. So these patterns kept
Maybe depending on the strength of the individual as well, right? As to
yeah.
how he was able to contain these entities, call these voices entities, right? So whether he
Yeah.
was
So
able to combat them, if you will.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it became a battle. You know, they would
Right.
really have to fight to stay there and to listen. Okay. So there was a series of patterns that started appearing, and they were consistent patterns. And I started wondering about that because if they're consistent patterns, then they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run consistent patterns. So the first one was negativity. The second was they were anti-religious. The third is they create and foster negative emotion. They want the patient to feel rotten. They want them to feel paranoid. You know, they want to keep them at a very low vibrational level. The fourth one I saw was that they actually drain the victim. So there's a one-to-one correspondence between the voices showing up and the victim's energy disappearing. I've even had a couple of prisoners report that said when the voices started, they could feel their energy being sucked out of them, and that was consistent. You know,
Right.
so these patterns kept running on and on. Like they get louder after sunset. They get louder when ignored. They foster self-destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They demand the attention of the victim. They maneuver for increased control over the victim. They gaslight. They manipulate perception. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. They demand that the victim not tell anybody else about them. And it goes on and on and on. So if you go to
Wow.
my website at jerrymarzinsky.com, there's a list of 23 of these patterns. And what I'm
When
saying,
you say access to their memory, are you saying, I mean, that these entities would in fact have childhood memories? They would remember, they would have access to all the memories that the person is actually.
well, they have access to every rotten thing that the patient has ever done.
Oh, right. Okay.
You know,
Wow.
while the patient is in a low frequency. Okay. So they can go in there and they can pull up stuff that the patient had forgotten about 20 years ago. You know, it's like, hey, you borrowed a quarter from George 20 years ago. You never paid it back. You're a rotten person. You know, stuff like that. You know, they have access to that, and they'll pull it up
So
and
they
they'll
would actually hammer on that, create more guilt,
yep.
and and of course, guilt is such a destructive emotion that it's going to keep destroying the person's psyche and any form of well-being as well, right? Wow.
Yep. And they'll pull up any evidence that the person is no good or rotten, any rotten thing he's ever done. They'll pull it up,
Yeah.
throw it in his face. And all of us have kind of experienced that to some degree. And they do hit us all. They don't just hit, mental patients. They hit us all. Like,
Wow.
you ever get like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And it goes round and round and round. And why did you say that? And why did you do that? And it just keeps circling round and round. That's them throwing it in our faces. They hit us all.
Wow.
Any negative thought that comes, Sherry Sweeney said, any negative thought that comes into your mind about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side. And all of us have
Absolutely.
had episodes where you're just minding your own business, and all of a sudden this horrible thought just jumps into your mind. Like here in Arizona, not many people have lawns. We cut cactus, and on my property, I got a good sized property. They go out there and cut the cactus with a machete to keep them down.
Right.
And I have a beautiful husky, pure white, and she was out there with me, and she runs by while I'm cutting this cactus, and all of a sudden this thought just stormed through my head, cut her head off, and I was just horrified. I mean, that's not something that I would ever think of on my own. It was not anything that I would ever do, but I had the machete and I had the means to do it, and here's something telling me to do it. And I was just shocked. I mean, even though I knew it wasn't my thought, it still created negative emotion that would even appear in my mind.
Could that not also be, obviously when you're working with people, the schizophrenics who've got all these entities and things attached? I mean, I just go back to the conversation last week as well with Lynn, where, she could literally see as well these entities attached to the people. I mean, that they would sort of take a free ride on you as well. And if they can stay there for a bit, they will. I mean, and I think obviously you being of sound mind, of strong mind as well, it would be clear for you that that is not your thought, and you could then get rid of that. But when people are, let's say, taking drugs all the time, alcoholics, whether it's sort of pharmaceutical drugs or street drugs, as I call them, it doesn't really matter, right? So it's this constant gaps in your energy, if you will, that these things find a home in.
Yeah, they're like sharks in the ocean, and they smell blood and they move in on it.
Yeah, and they go.
So they're attracted by negative emotion.
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
Like what's going on right now in the world. Now, if you look at these patterns I just read, I mean, all 23 of them there's a one-to-one correspondence between these voices that the schizophrenics hear and what's coming over the mainstream media right now around the planet. The deep state mainstream media. It's the same exact things: negativity, anti-religious, create negative emotion, energetically drain the victims, isolation. I mean,
chaos,
it's all
chaos,
it's
chaos,
the same.
Yeah,
it's the same voices on a macroscopic scale. The deep
you see
state,
what's coming through the television set.
Yeah,
crazy. Wow. Caleb, I'd love to hear your input on that. And maybe you could also just start, Caleb, if you don't mind, just sharing where you come from on this topic.
Well, as you know from the past shows we've done, I came up through the Project Gateway program, or the GATE program. It kind of put us children in touch with our astral selves or spiritual selves in a negative way. It wasn't positive at all. And that was introduced to me by my father, who was a major in the U.S. Army. He was part of that program. He's also a 33rd degree Freemason. So that kind of ties that together for the spiritual side of things. And Jerry, I don't know where you're at with your spiritual walk or what you believe. At the risk of sounding crazy, pun intended, Some of what I'll tell you is incredible to hear. Um, I'm sure you've heard of Noah's flood. I'm sure you've heard of the destruction of the earth, of the antediluvian world, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, these entities, or these things, these voices you're dealing with, are half angel, half human spirits that died in the flood. They, if they were rotten in that life, they're still rotten. They don't die like we, different than us. They're separate.
Yeah, the
And
Anunnaki.
they will seek out body to reenact sins that they had back in those days. If you have a murderer, they're going to try to inhabit a body to commit murder. If they're sexual sadists, they'll try to be a sexual sadist in a different body. And the really sad part is a lot of people don't know that they give permission to those things, even when they don't say yes or no. Ignorance, mostly.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, that's what's happening. I don't know if that makes any kind of sense at all.
Yeah, you got the the archons, or the what they call them, the Nephilim.
Right.
Yeah.
The Nephilim were the living ones, and the Rephaim are the dead.
Yeah, you got those. There's several different kinds, and then you got the ones that are earthbound spirits that they've somehow taken control over, and told them that they have no life, and if they don't follow what they tell them to do, then they will cease to exist, or they will be sent to some place called the pit. So
Right.
these are kind of the low level troopers, and then there's levels on top of them. There's like sergeants and lieutenants, and then there's these Nephilim characters that kind of run the show, it looks like. So they have minions.
Now.
Yeah, they have minions underneath them.
Right. And that's actually hard to explain to people who don't know anything about what you've gone through or what you've seen. But it's amazing to see that you understand that just from what you've learned. I know it wasn't a religious program you went through. It's an enlightenment for me to know that you know it.
Oh yeah, I've met their sergeants, or their lieutenants. I've never I never knowingly met a higher up one, other than they tried to kill me once. I mean, just it was like I was 2 weeks out from one of the biggest podcasts I was ever about to do, and it was in Mexico, and this staph infection erupted in my right shoulder. It came out of nowhere. There was no injury to that shoulder. There was nothing wrong. I mean, I went to bed one night with a normal shoulder, woke up the next morning, I couldn't move it. It was 6 months of antibiotics. I went to the emergency room. They operated on me the next day. And then it was 6 months of antibiotics after that. I had no idea that a shoulder could get a staph infection. And they said, had they not treated it, it would have killed me. It did knock me out of that interview. But who was it? Freeman Fly. It was Freeman Fly's interview. So he waited 6 months for me to get better, and then put me on. And we went and got it done anyway. So yeah, I'm not their favorite person. They're constantly taking chips out of my life.
Yeah, I'm not their favorite person either, because I turned my back on them about 10 years ago, and they've tried to physically kill me at least 5 different times. Some very recently. So.
Yeah,
my background with psychology, education, is I tried to disclose some sexual abuse when I was a young boy, and they just kind of turned the tables on me and said I was making it up. It's just voices in my head. I was lying, and I actually wasn't. So I have a actually really negative reaction to even talking to you right now. So it's not a bad thing. It's just an associated memory. I had a sleepless night thinking about what I was going to say and everything else. I'm still kind of feeling that way right now.
You know what?
It's a PTSD reaction.
That the mace would help you. It's a new energetic therapy. You can go to www.maceenergymethod.com /about/ and there's a list of practitioners there. This new method, it's an energetic therapy. It's not like any other therapy I've ever seen, and it works better than anything I've ever seen or experienced. It can get rid of traumas, major traumas, in an hour, and they're gone. You know, you'll remember what happened, but there will be no negative charge to it. I mean, I highly recommend it. You know, go there. There's a list of therapists there. There's not a lot of therapists around the planet right now, maybe about a dozen of them. You know, but it works wonders with trauma. They could really help you out.
Right. With what you were saying about the negativity, that's exactly what some of these magicians and other people who want to enslave people look for. The agenda that they ally with those spirits, and they attach spirits to people using different types of magic. And they call it the soul trade. And they can actually take that person's energy, like you said, down to nothing. And they use it for their own purposes.
Yeah, that's what you see a lot of times with these mass murderers who go crazy and shoot a bunch of people.
Right. Yeah, it's all different kinds of evil that they promote and put out there. But it's definitely one of the core things that they look for is that negativity. And then they get the person entrapped in an institution or a prison. And they just keep using them. It's like a battery or a Duracell until they're empty or they commit suicide or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, the suicide rate of schizophrenics is 3 to 5 times higher than the regular population, but so is the suicide rate of psychiatrists. They're equal.
Yeah, I got half my family's involved in psychology, so.
I didn't find psychology very useful. I had a ton of it. 8 years of it. Yeah, 8 years of psychology and counseling, and it was virtually useless clinically on the front lines. You know, this regular psychotherapy just doesn't work. And when I ran into this MACE stuff, I was just fascinated. I just absolutely fascinated because it got rid of trauma in an hour. I mean, lifelong trauma. And it could locate these traumas, and it could clear them out. You know, I've never seen anything like it. It fascinated me. So I had to know everything there was about it. I went through their training program and highly recommend it, called the MACE Energy Method. It's an energetic therapy because memory is energy, thoughts are energy, feelings are energy. You can't cure anything by pouring psychiatric drugs, toxic psychiatric drugs on the brain. That doesn't cure anything. It's like pouring Thorazine on a magnetic field and expecting the magnetic field to disappear. It just doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I hope other people hear that too, so that they can understand what's happening to them. That's what I've been trying to do, is trying to expose that whole process. It's not a hidden secret or something that's in the back. You're just crazy, they'll say. Some people will say that way. That's why I'm speaking up as I do.
Yeah, I've heard of MK Ultra, and I've actually talked to one woman who was a victim of them. It's not a joke. It's not a fabrication. It's not some made up conspiracy theory. I mean, they exist. They've tortured and taken over a lot of different people.
I think Caleb might have popped out. It seems that his internet might have popped out lately. Let's hope he comes back in again. But I think it's absolutely fascinating, Jerry. You know, I mean, I find this super fascinating to actually look into, because as you're saying, you know, For me, the voices in the head and the very things, they look for that low vibrating frequency. They look for the negativity. They're completely anti, whether it's religion or anything good. I can't imagine that it's only religion, though. Really, when somebody's on a higher vibrating level and they're feeling good about life, they're feeling fantastic about where they're headed. They're kind, they're compassionate, they're caring, all of these things. They're literally doing God's work, in other words, no matter what your religion is, right? Your frequency is high. These things can't get to you, right? And it's very interesting because I know Caleb on the other shows has actually spoken a lot about that as well, talking about the fact that their souls are actually captured, and very oftentimes in crystals, like they call it soul gems, right? There's a whole process to getting that, because they'll get them, and there's always got to be a gap in there, though. They've got to be able to get to that person somehow. They can't just get to you anyhow. So on some level, the people that are whose spirits, if you will, souls are encapsulated in this process, have given permission, whether it's conscious or unconscious. There's a process of permission that is given, and that's when they drain it all the time. It's used for all sorts of dodgy purposes, and I hope he comes in, because I'd love for him to speak more about that. But then obviously, and then that's when these negative entities, the Rephaim, Nephilim, that sort of thing, I think specifically it would be the Rephaim, I'm not 100% sure though, that then attaches themselves to these people and makes them makes their lives a living hell. So that constant negative banter, kill yourself, you're worth nothing. Here he comes in again. So yeah. So all of that, which I think is absolutely, it's a fascinating process. And again, I just think it's so amazing that you guys are actually, with the, as you talk about the mace energy, the energy work is so profoundly important. I mean, I've been saying that since forever, right? It's all about your sound, the frequency and vibration. Hey, Caleb, you're back.
Yeah, my computer just shut completely down. That was obviously something's important about this conversation.
Yeah, something doesn't like us.
Well, all three of us tonight have had some issue. I mean, of course, I have it was crazy. And I want to just actually say this to the viewers as well. For those of you who didn't listen here in the beginning, I mean, we were supposed to be streaming on StreamYard again, the normal a platform that I use. And that, of course, Jerry couldn't get in. Last week you had problems getting in. And when we came onto Zoom now, it was this whole rigmarole for me to get in. And the next thing, I'm on Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa, which is the second channel for me, the healing channel, actually, which is probably a very good thing. Anyway, it's probably the right channel, but and everyone is thinking that we need to be on Aquarius Rising, right? And now, of course, Caleb gets knocked out. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. But Caleb, you were saying, I was just actually saying, I'm not quite sure where we were not, or where we knocked off when you were speaking. So yeah, about these literally these entities that you have to, these guys. I want to actually ask you, Caleb, what type of permission, when you say that they've got to give permission, obviously, whether it's conscious or unconscious, how is permission granted for these guys to, and you could maybe talk about that, the soul gem capture, right? And then how does that whole process work? Can you maybe share more with us on that?
Well, everything's in a state of energy in one form or another. Like I've told you, your teeth are appetite crystals. You have other crystals in your body. So crystals have a lot to do with everything you do physically, one form or another. And what they do with the authority that you give them, it's like the stop sign principle. Just because you don't know what a stop sign is doesn't mean you can be ignorant of it. It's still a stop sign. And what the law will tell you is you should have educated yourself on what that sign meant. No excuse. Ignorance of the law is what they say. So it's kind of the same here. if people don't know what they're doing, they're still doing it anyway. They gave permission at some point, somehow, somewhere. And it's through the media, the lifestyle, everything else. The drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the rock and roll, whatever you want to call it.
Ouija boards.
Ouija boards are a bad one. That's an obvious one, but it can be almost anything of this world.
And
Almost
spirit,
anything.
what is spirit, what, listening to spirits that you don't know where they come from. What is it? Channeling. That could get dangerous.
Yep. We were just talking about that last show with the angelic realm. People were trying to incorporate angels into their worship services. Even good ones. There's only one focus you should have, and that's on God Himself. All this other stuff is just from the old dead world, the Rephaim.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that channeling. You know, these things can morph into whatever form they want to morph into.
Exactly. And most people don't know that. They don't even know what they're dealing with for the most part.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Popped out again.
I don't know if he's popping in and out on purpose or he's getting thrown off.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, we certainly are having fun and games on this channel tonight on this topic for sure. So yeah, very interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think that Jerry, let me ask you from your side as well. What have you found to be the most successful when it comes to working with people that have schizophrenia? What has been your most successful? I mean, obviously in these institutions and stuff, how have you helped them work with people or work with the schizophrenics?
Well, I think number one is they got to realize that those voices are not them.
Right.
Because they sound like them. Yeah, you might think that, oh yeah, they're hearing to this voice that's going, do this, do that. No, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds just like the normal thoughts that are running through their heads or your head. I mean, there's no change for the most part. It sounds just like your normal thought, only it's like, oh, you're stupid, or you're not worth a damn, or you're dumb, or there's no change in volume or tempo. And it sounds just like the thousands of other thoughts that run through your head on a normal day. So when they start consistently telling you you're no good, you're stupid, you're ugly, and so is everybody else around you, and that's them. That doesn't come from you. So number one, those voices don't belong to you. You didn't have them when you were born.
Right. Exactly.
And, number two, they're consistently negative. So, and they're liars. Okay. So Sherry came up with a program called That's a Lie program. Okay. So I'd say 95% of what the voices tell schizophrenics are lies. They don't care how they upset them, as long as they upset them. So they'll tell them lie after lie after lie after lie, all designed to upset them, to generate that negative emotional energy on which they feed. Now, I found out that they don't just take it themselves. Matter of fact, they're allowed only very little of it. They have to pass it up the line. So they have to pass it up to the sergeants and the lieutenants, up to these Nephilim characters up on top there. So they're constantly milking the human race for this energy. Yeah.
Have you found, because I know Caleb was saying as well, and I know Jesse Zaberta, one of my other guests as well, speaks about similar stuff happening in prisons. In fact, in these maths, obviously where they can get a lot of people together, that sort of thing. Have you had any experience or heard anything, any knowledge around that in terms of what happens in prisons with this sort of the situation, the schizophrenia,
With
this kind of
schizophrenia,
like,
yeah, is one, the prisons are so cheap. So what they did is this is the deep state again. They knocked out virtually all the state hospitals, where they were keeping these guys and treating them. Okay, they go, oh yeah, we'll put them out in the communities, which it's a more normal environment. Yeah, it's a more normal environment, but they can't survive there. They can't work.
right,
Their thinking is shot. They can't do anything productive. They can't support themselves. So what do they end
right,
up doing? They end up stealing stuff or dealing drugs or doing something illegal just to stay alive. So they end up in prison. So now the prison is full of them, and it costs twice as much to keep them in a prison than it does to keep them in a state hospital, because you got to pay for all
right,
the security and the security devices and the guards and the training and the all the barbed wire and the detection stuff and the searches and it's just so much more expensive to keep them in the prison. Now, what I've seen in some instances is that the gangs will take away their antipsychotic medicine and let them go crazy. And then they start pointing hey, that guy over there in the other gang, he's threatening to kill you. You better go knock him off first. And they'll make
wow,
the guy real paranoid. They'll use him like a human torpedo to go attack these guys in the other gang. And he's crazy. I mean, so he doesn't have any concept of what's going to happen to him. He's paranoid, and he goes and does a hit, stabs this other guy over there. So they use him like human torpedoes.
wow.
And
That's completely insane. It's, it really is so bloody evil that that they've discovered how to do this. And it makes perfect sense that in prisons and psych wards, stuff like that, where there's a large percentage of people who really don't have control, right, over their bodies, their minds, that sort of thing. Because usually when people have gotten to these positions or places, rather, there's been such a consistent negative bombardment throughout their lives, basically. Would you agree with that? It's like being
yes,
hammering all the
right,
time. It's like that. And as you say, it's like a predator. It's like a predator who smells blood, right? So the minute they smell blood, they're gonna go and they're gonna keep at that one until they've got him, right?
right. Yeah,
Wow.
I've heard instances of where the voice, for the first time, a person started hearing voices, and the voice goes, "Go pick up that pencil over there," or "Go sit down in that chair." Kind of like, how much control do I have over this new car I got here? And
Right.
most of the places I worked with, I was working with up until I started working in the emergency rooms. I was working with adults, okay, but in the emergency rooms, I started running into children that were psychotic, and it was like these were kids. They were like 10, 11, 12, started hearing voices. It blew me away. The biggest drug, though, in the prison, got more prisoners per se into the prisons than any other drug, was meth. The prisoners called it the devil's drug, because meth will it opens you up, and the voices just jump right in there. It's a very dangerous
It is
drug.
on another level. I've seen people go crazy on that stuff. And it's
Yes.
very often because there's such a lack of sleep. On that drug, they'll go for days and days and days without sleep. I don't know what your take is on that.
Well, they do that, but they keep using it because it makes them feel like Superman. So what
Right.
happens is they start hallucinating, they start hearing the voices, and then they go, "Oh, these are just hallucinations. They'll go away when I come down." And they do. And they may do that for 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 times, and they always go away. Then one day they don't. They're there forever. They don't go away. And these people then become as psychotic as any schizophrenic that has been locked up in prison or in a psych ward. They're just they hear the voices just as much. The voices take control. They start taking control of them. So then they have a whole nother battle. They become non-functional. They can't work. They can't think straight. All because they let these things in using the meth.
This is crazy. Caleb, I see you back. I know that your laptop keeps shutting down. Caleb is just actually messaging me now saying this has never happened before. So, but he's back. Let's see. But I see he's on mute. Okay. Actually, speaking about kids, I actually wanted to really discuss that topic with you as well. Actually, Caleb, are you online?
I am.
Okay, cool. I would really like to find out when we're looking at children. I watched a program the other day called The Children of Darkness. Wow. And it was taken with these teenage kids mainly, and in America, different psych facilities, right? And one in particular was, oh my gosh, I wish I'd written it down. I've got my memory so bad when it comes to that. South Beach South Beach something. It sounded like all nice. But it's for also these young kids. Well, young kids as in teenagers. What is your take? And Caleb, I'd actually like to hear from you, yeah. When it comes to, I mean, we're not just talking prisons, because Jerry and I were talking about prisons now as well, and what happens in prisons. And I know you've mentioned the prisons before as well. But when it comes to these young teenagers, I mean, it is absolutely horrific what they go through. What is your take, Caleb, on the teenagers and stuff when it comes to this sort of stuff?
Well, they're impressionable. First of all, they're still learning. They're not fully grown. They're not fully mature or anything else. Obviously, they're going to be more susceptible. They're going to fall for stuff a lot more than anybody else will, peer pressure and whatnot. So they're easier
So are
to
you
manipulate.
saying, sorry, carry on?
They're easier to manipulate.
And
So
and
are
the
you
voice,
saying, sorry, Jerry, go for it.
yeah, the voices find them easier to manipulate. Also, I remember one case where one of the, and this was in a juvenile facility, where this one juvenile kid said, I'm going to kill myself. I can't stand this. And all the rest of them jumped in there and goes, yeah, do it. And then he did. That's how brutal it gets in there. The kids, most of them are badly psychologically, emotionally, and physically abused. I think that's a common underlying factor with all schizophrenics. There's usually a lot of abuse in their background, a lot of trauma.
Right. Wow. I don't know, Caleb, would you say that's also from drug use, teenagers using drugs? When they kind of like maybe open to that, is a lot of that coming from drugs as well, especially in this day and age, because it just seems to be a lot more freely available to teenagers nowadays.
Of course, drugs, more so the culture behind the drug use. The culture is what's enculturing them to be that way, making it seem like it's okay. Yeah, you can do this. I mean, look at the transigent with that whole situation.
Right. What would
Again,
be the way best? Carry on, sorry. I'm obviously over speaking over you. I don't want to do that.
Pressure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I just said look at the peer pressure part of it.
Right. Wow. It's actually really sad. I mean, it's when you see it, and as you say, Jerry, what you were mentioning as well in some of the previous shows is that nowadays the kids going on meds, right? You're looking at kids, little 5-year-old kids going on this ADD, ADHD medication. What is it? I don't want to say, is it Ritalin? I know a common one,
Yeah,
that the kids in South Africa
Ritalin and
use is
Adderall.
Ritalin.
Ritalin and Adderall, they're both forms of meth. So I've ran into a bunch of prisoners who were on meth. I mean, the prison is full of them. I mean, they go psychotic, they start criminal behavior, they get thrown in the prison. And I'd ask them, how did this start? And they go, well, I was prescribed Ritalin. And then I said, well, that probably made you feel about as good as you ever felt. Why did you keep pushing it? And they go, I don't know. They kept pushing it and pushing it, getting more and more and more and more until they were addicted to the meth, and that these dark spirits jumped in there and took them over. So psychiatry are big pharma's drug pushers. Virtually none of those meds that they dish out cure anything. They just like chemical band-aids. Not to say they're not necessary, because they're, believe me, I've seen prisoners and mental patients that could not be handled without those drugs. But for the average guy, for like 85% of their patients could be handled much better, much cheaper, and much more effectively with the MACE energy method and finding a MACE therapist, because these drugs don't cure anything. All they do is the antipsychotics just kind of calm them down. The antidepressants, some of them even they have to put a warning on there that it may trigger, suicidal ideations or suicidal behavior. I don't know how many times I've heard once somebody that was depressed started on those drugs, they ended up killing themselves. I mean, and they're making, like I said, $14 billion a year selling that crap, and it doesn't work.
So what do you say to the people that are actually working in these institutions? Because we have, obviously, in these psych institutions, we have, like, let's say, I don't know how many patients would be in there. And then you have, obviously, your psychiatrists and things going in there. And I speak particularly because not too long ago, I got a message from a lady working with the teenagers, teen girls in particular, in these places, in one of these places in America. And she was very concerned because she obviously was aware that they've been affected on some level, they're victims of something, but she needs to administer these drugs to them. I mean, I find that so hard if I was in that position. So how does someone, just a question for you, Jerry, who's someone who's working in these institutions, right? And especially this particular person I'm referring to reached out with younger girls, that is forced to give them these disgusting medications that, even though medically that's what they have to take, and you can't turn around and say, no, don't take that stuff, I'm not administering it. I mean, their asses would get fired within 3 seconds flat. So what do you say to people that are in these institutions administering these disgusting drugs to these people, and actually maybe even watching this program knowing that they're not doing these people a service at all, that they're actually contributing to something very negative in the long run?
Yeah, and I've heard from a lot of those people. They write me and they say, I know these drugs aren't doing them any good. I know these drugs aren't curing anything, but I have to give them to them. One of them quit. Matter of fact, there's one who's willing to speak out. She was a psych nurse. She's willing to come on and talk about how she felt about that. But see, what happened is the medical system got taken over in the United States by the Carnegies back in like 1900s, 1910, something like that. They bought off Congress here, and they made it a law that the only medicine that can be taught in medical schools is psychotropic medicine. So drugs. Everything has to revolve around drugs. Because they were making money selling drugs. So they made a law that if you don't teach a pharmaceutical curriculum, then you can't graduate doctors. And that just spread around the world. So now it's nuts. They're feeding these drugs to people that are toxic. The antipsychotics actually shrink their brains with long-term use. It turns them into walnuts. They found that out
Yeah.
with autopsies in psychiatric hospitals where they did autopsies on these people who'd been taking these drugs for years. They actually cause neurological and physiological damage to these patients. Not to say, again, not to say that in some cases they're warranted. I mean, I've seen prisoners, I've seen psych patients that there's no way you could control them without these drugs, not without getting hurt, you know. But the thing is, they're making it a plethora for everybody. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, well, you know, if all you got is a hammer and a nail, that's all you keep doing is beating on the nail. You know, like I said, the MACE energy method could probably fix 85% of the people that psychiatrists are dousing down with these toxic drugs. I mean, cure them.
Right.
In a very short time instead of taking these toxic drugs. Of course, they're not going to want that information going out.
No, of course not. They don't want anything like that going out, because then, of course, it would obviously be contributing to something which doesn't serve them at all, right? They'd be losing money and they'd be losing power. And that's two of the most important things. And that's why, it makes me really so sad to know that there are so many people working in these institutions, actually knowing that what they're doing is not serving the people that they are dousing with these drugs, but yet they feel they can't do anything. They're paralyzed to do anything about it, right? They themselves don't feel strong enough to be able to institute and make the change, because they don't feel like they can't come up against the system.
If you want, I could hunt up one of those people and bring her on your show.
I would love to, please.
Okay, let me say, I know I talked to her maybe a month ago. I'll look her up and get back to you. I'm sure she would be willing to speak to you.
Yeah, I'd love to. And also the lady we had on last week,
Lynn
Morné. I mean, what a powerful woman that is. As well. She's also a psych nurse, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
She's a nurse and she's an RN. So
right.
She's willing to testify that those drugs don't do any good either. I mean, they basically just dope these people up.
And I think the more people, the more nurses and psychiatrists who are realizing this stuff need to stand up. I mean, I just think it's time.
Well, I've heard from 4 psychiatrists who kind of wrote me on the sly, and kind of like, I agree with what you're saying. 2 of them worked in Romania, 1 of them worked in France. Okay, they completely understood. But the problem is, just like friggin' YouTube, like, well, if you say anything against the medical establishment or the World Health Organization, we're going to throw you off, which means you can't say anything innovative. You can't bring new information into the medical field. You can't bring anything contrary to these controllers that are ruling the planet.
Exactly.
And I really hope Elon Musk buys YouTube. He talked about it. They need to be bought out because they are some of the they're the worst.
Oh yeah, no, they certainly push the dark agenda. Caleb, I'd like to hear what you have to say about that in terms of just making positive change. I mean, obviously how it's done. The people, well, not necessarily the people, but the methods used to suck the life out of a lot of these patients and prisoners and stuff like that. So I'd like to hear from you. What do you think might be the solution there?
Well, for me, I had a God experience. That might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it sure did for me. And using the name of Jesus and walking in that new power as opposed to the old power really sets people free. Power of prayer. It's not just positivity, it's plugging into a divine source of energy, a true frequency, not a dying light, not a red shifted light. That's what also helps make that difference. I think the MACE energy will plug into that perfectly well, actually.
Yeah, that's the only permanent solution.
Yeah.
Right. I do believe. That That might be God's answer in the form of a miracle for some of these people who have never had a chance to change anything any other way. Yet it be all things to all men.
Right.
Why is the serpent gentle as a dove?
But what you'll find is schizophrenics don't want anything to do with religion. They don't want anything to do with prayer. They don't want anything to do with God. You know, if you tell them to repeat the 23rd Psalm, the voices go nuts. And I've had them tell me that the voices react to the 23rd Psalm like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. So why would a hallucination? Why would a hallucination be anti-religious? Why would it care?
A way of showing them how to use that word, or the sword of the spirit, is don't quote it as a verse. Say it like it's your own words. That kind of cloaks it from those evil spirits that try to get angry or whatever, what have you. You can speak it over them, and they will definitely respond to that. But not like you think. It won't be the violence or anything. That they'll be subdued. That works too.
And what were you saying? Speak over them?
Yes, speak God's word over them. Don't say chapter and verse, just speak it over them.
How? Give an example.
Just like I just did with you guys. Be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. Be all things to all men. Those are verses there from the Bible. I did not quote the verse. I just spoke it over you. It has an impact and effect. Whereas a righteous man availeth much. Another one. You can use it that way. Try it once.
Okay.
It's like they don't like the religious, they don't like the whole religious or the word of God, the word of Jesus, etc. So it really is, I mean, I think but it would make sense to me, you know, that once, and as you say, you know, God works with us in very mysterious ways. So if that is also, you know, if we're looking at, let's say, the Mace energy method, with people who are using these methods with integrity, right, with the right spiritual essence, and it's working, then that would also be one of the ways that God would heal these people.
I hope there's some kind of follow-up to that too, because you clean the house once, but something else can come back and bring more with them. So you have to form some kind of bulwark against it.
What the Mace energy method does is it works with what they call a negative identity. Okay, so during trauma, which schizophrenics have plenty of, and most people do, all your attention is turned on you. You make a negative decision about yourself as a result of that trauma, and it gets buried in your subconscious mind. And it kind of runs your life like a computer virus from behind. Mace will go in there and it will dismantle that negative identity. It will remove all the energy from it. So if you had a horrible trauma, you know, somewhere in your life, and every time you think of it, you just go, it will take that negative charge away. So you will still remember the trauma, but there will be no negative charge to it at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I agree. I agree, because I think what happens is, obviously, even though spiritually, and this is what I've observed in my life and working with a lot of people as well. So even though that spiritually, the entity might no longer have access to the body itself, the physical body, holds that residual, right? And that's, I think, where very often the PTSD of people that have been through these situations come from. So the body has that natural PTSD reaction. And that's when things like the Mace energy system will come in. So first, yes, absolutely, you know, abolish whatever it is that is working through your body. Get rid of the entities, you know, whether it's through prayer for religious people, or raising your frequency. You know, everyone calls it a different thing, whether you are whatever denomination you are, right? Whatever it is that you need to raise your frequency. But then, you know, at the same time, as Caleb, what you were saying, you know, you've got to keep cleaning that house. Right. So it's the same thing, brushing your teeth every day type of thing. Right. So there's a cleansing process, but then there's still that residual in the body that holds the physical body hostage in certain ways, even though the entity might not be there anymore. And that, I think, is where Jerry, I don't know what you would say about that, where the Mace energy
Mace works with that too. Because
yeah.
you know, there's been some where we removed the mental trauma, but found a place in the body where there was energy or anxiety trapped, and that was even bigger than the mental part. You know, like a lot of times it's in the chest, it's in the heart. You know, so that can be removed. Okay.
Right.
So sometimes it's in a joint, or it's in a arm or shoulder or something like that. It's a place where the body stores that anxiety, that trauma, and it
right. Exactly.
and you tap into that, and it's just like boom. It just, there's an explosion almost.
It's cellular level, right? It's that cellular level. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's that cellular level memory. It's the cellular memory that needs to be released. Even though the entity is gone, the memory within the cell needs to be.
It never ceases to amaze me how you know how much can be trapped in a part of the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, if this is if this is being made available, and it's really it's a way that people are healing through it, I think it's absolutely awesome. Then it comes from God. You know, God works with different people in different ways. And if, you know, if your religion says that's going to work for you and it works in that way for you, fantastic. Other people, different strokes for different folks, right? Other people will be working in this sort of way as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, the only time I've seen the Mace energy method not work is if the person could not form an image. And those are very rare.
Explain that to me. If a person could not form an image, what do you mean by that?
Form an image. So you have what they call a negative identity that the person has created to deal with the traumatic situation. Okay?
Right.
All right. All what Mace found was, if you can get those traits, turn it into a picture, focus the attention on that picture, it will drain it.
Right.
It will actually drain that trauma. You know?
Right.
So he found that the mind doesn't work how psychology and psychiatry says it does. Psychology and psychiatry had no idea what the mind is or how it operates. Mace found that what happens is that the mind, all it does is take pictures of where you focus your attention.
Right. Absolutely.
And
I fully agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree.
You can get the mind to focus on concepts or ethereal kind of things. You know, feelings, concepts, thoughts, you know, stuck emotion, and you can bring those up, and then if you can turn them into an image, you can get rid of them, and they're gone.
I fully agree. I fully agree. I fully agree. And I'm actually just seeing, because I'm seeing some of the chats that come up here. I can't really see too well, but because it's on my phone, because on Zoom I can't see the chats, the comments coming up. But I mean, I know there's a lot of religious people that watch this show as well. And I just want to say as well, you know, I agree that if that works for you, then that works for you, right? But I also know a lot of religious people who it hasn't worked for, right? So it could be releasing yourself of that energy or that spiritual attachment, call it for want of a better expression, right? Entity, whatever. but you have to be able to have the mindset and to be able to continue with that in your own body, right? So it's the spiritual aspect that comes first, yes. But after that, it's releasing that within the body at cellular level on a physical level. And that comes with the mindset you're talking about, Jerry. It's that draining it. It's that constant image, the picture, right?
Well,
Is that
yeah,
what you're saying?
you do not have to be religious for MACE to work.
I
It works.
agree.
It works anyway. And another amazing thing about it is the therapist doesn't have to know what the trauma was. They don't have to know. As long as the patient knows what it is, it still works. So that's great because these normal, regular therapies, oh, tell me all about the sexual abuse that you went through, and they go through all the details. Nobody wants to do that. You know?
Right. To relive that is traumatic. Absolutely.
This method, you don't have to talk about it. You don't have to tell the therapist anything, which amazes me still. You know,
but it's in the frequency, because that method no doubt will work within the frequency and iron out that frequency and release the impurity, if you will, within the energy system, right? That's what it seems like.
It releases it kind of how do you say it?
Yeah.
This creates the programming. Okay, so
absolutely heals the DNA. Heals the DNA.
There's times where, you know, so MACE calls it a negative identity. Okay. Now for me, there's been like a gray area where sometimes I think it's an entity and you use the MACE on it and it vanishes. Sometimes I think it's a negative identity. It turns out to be an entity. Okay. So even with schizophrenics, using the MACE method to get rid of the trauma helps. Still helps.
Right.
Now the voices don't like it. What they'll do is they'll show up and they'll start going, don't listen to this guy, don't follow his instructions, don't do anything he's telling you to. He's full of crap, he's crazy, you know, just blow him off. That's what they'll do. They don't want any interference.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Wow, how fascinating and how interesting. So I really, at the end of the day, I think people have got to, you know, when I really honestly think when stuff like this is coming to our attention, and I want to just say to you, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for the courage that you have brought to this entire planet and to human beings to disclose this type of information. Honestly, it is absolutely groundbreaking. And I think it's fascinating for you to have brought this forward in the way that you have and taken the risks you have in doing what you've done. And I will certainly, definitely be looking into that MACE energy method more. And I would love to speak more to the lady the psych nurse you were speaking to as well. And I want to say, you know, to everyone who's working within these facilities, you know, I think we're not there by accident. And it breaks my heart, you know, as I said, when that lady reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, working with the young girls, and, you know, having to continuously feed them something that she knew was not working for them. In fact, contributing to their downfall, the way I see it, you know, when we hear stories like this. So the more of us who actually speak up and speak out about these things and choose not to continue with these negative cycles and negative patterns,
well,
you know.
Those poor people, I've been in that same situation for decades. You know, you can't say this kind of stuff to a psychiatrist. They'll go nuts.
Right.
You know, they don't believe in evil spirits. They don't believe in anything but their drugs, and they're brainwashed that way. There's only 4 of them that I know on the planet that actually know what's going on, as far as my knowledge. Only 4 on the entire planet
that have reached out to
things are Yeah, that have reached out to me that know that these things are evil spirits and that they're not hallucinations. Okay.
Right.
So what I would do is, and it's tricky, especially when I was working in the emergency rooms, I would have to judge every single patient. How much information can I give them before they went off, or how much can I trust them? You know, now one of the most important things, these people who are working in these situations like you mentioned, is to tell them that those voices are not who they are. They're not hallucinations, you know, but they got to watch it, because if psychiatry finds out that they told them that, they're going to be in trouble. You know, the other thing was that's really important for them to know is that these things are parasites. You know, that's the last thing the voices want their patients to know, is that they're
But they're
parasites.
parasites.
So if you had a big parasite sucking on your arm right now, you wouldn't just sit there and look at it, would you? No, you do something about it. You know?
Oh, that's so disgusting.
So they can tell these patients, hey, listen, you know, every time the voices come, your energy level drops to nothing, right? You know, well, you've heard the voices thousands of times over the years, and every time they come, your energy level disappears. You didn't use that
Absolutely.
energy. You were just laying in bed, tossing and turning, you know, and lots of times they say they felt so weakened, so tired, that it felt like they were working out in the hot sun with a pickaxe all day. That's how
Right.
tired they feel, being drained by these things.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
what's interesting is that the patients don't realize that, you know, even though it's happened to them thousands of times, they're blocked from seeing this. You know, they
Right.
just go, oh, I feel bad. I feel bad. The voices are awful. I feel bad. You know, and then you ask them, where did the energy go? You know, you were laying in bed all night. You were just tossing and turning. You didn't use that energy. Where did it go? And the majority will say, well, I don't know. You come back on them and you say, well, you know, this has happened to you thousands of times before. Every time it happens, your energy's gone. You know, where would you think it would go? Well, I don't know. So what I do is going, well, if you stuck your hand in a fire and you did that 100 times, and every time you got burned, what's burning you? They didn't have any trouble with, oh, it's the
Right.
fire. But you point it back to, hey, there's something sucking your energy. Then they're
Yeah.
blocked from seeing it.
Right.
So people working in the traditional system right now, they're going to have to work very quietly under the table and not let psychiatry know what's happening. I remember one situation, and this was in a private psych hospital I was working at, where the patients got together, and there was this one psychotic patient who was having a lot of trouble. So the other patients decided they're going to get together and they're going to pray over him and do an exorcism. So the nurse noticed that. She goes, okay, well, what harm could that do? And she let it go on. When psychiatry found out about it, they almost fired her.
Wow.
That's how bizarre they are about anything, that
Yeah.
these voices are anything but what they say they are. Even if in the face of the fact that they're running patterns, if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations. They won't even look at that. And they've not done a single one iota of
Exactly.
research into the voices. None. They just get up there and go, it's like the high priest of ancient Egypt. We hereby declare that the voices are hallucinations because we said so. And that's all there's to it.
Right.
We're psychiatrists. We went through all this training. We know all this crap that you don't. You know, so they're hallucinations. We say they're hallucinations, they're hallucinations. You better listen to us.
And that's why they won't allow prayer either. They won't allow prayer either,
No,
because they know
no.
that it works, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep. They want to keep things status quo. They want to keep them just the way they are, with them making $14 billion each selling antipsychotics and antidepressant drugs. You know,
Exactly.
and you're not going to go into a psychiatrist's office and come out without a diagnosis and without some kind of drug. You know,
Right.
and that goes back to their DSM. You know, so you look at this, and you know, there's almost 50,000 people in the United States kill themselves every year. And there's more psychiatrists, there's more psych drugs, there's more psych nurses on the planet than there have ever been in the history of mankind. And the suicide rate keeps climbing every friggin' year. You know, so it's increasing like 2% a year. You know, there's 10,000 Americans. 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year. They've cut the research for schizophrenia down to a mere dribble. They don't want an answer. They don't want a cure. They want to keep selling their damn drugs. You know, what a report card this is. And then you think that the suicide rate of these high priests of psychiatry is virtually identical to that of their worst patients, the schizophrenics. What does that tell you? They can't even solve their own problems.
Right, exactly. Well, I think it's time that these guys lost their power, that's for sure. And the more of us who are speaking up about these things, and the more of us who actually stand up against it, you know, it's one thing sitting behind your keyboard. It's another thing actually standing up and taking a stand against this. And that takes courage.
But you got to be careful too, because, you know, they don't want anybody who doesn't buy into their delusions.
Yeah.
You know,
but that's why the thing is, you know, they're used to ruling by fear. That's how they rule, by fear.
Yeah.
So they will rule by fear like that, and then in the hope of intimidating everyone. So the more intimidation tactics they can instill on everyone, the better for them, because that keeps everyone suppressed.
Yeah, I've been in trouble with them a bunch of times.
Yeah, I know you have.
Like,
I know, that's why I say you're a pioneer in this industry, and that's why I know I, for one, am extremely grateful to you, because definitely, you know, it breaks my heart when I see people just sitting back and continuing doing something that they know is not serving anyone, but they'll do it because they're scared to lose their job, or whatever the case might be. We've got to stop that nonsense. It's up to us. Yeah. Anyway. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me again. I will definitely look you up again in the future. I know you're a busy man, and I've had you on 3 times now, and I've really enjoyed it. We'll talk again in the future. And I would like to hear from the lady you spoke about, one of the previous nurses that is actually speaking up. And
let me make a note of that.
Yeah, that'll be great. I would love to speak to more people who are actually doing something about this.
Okay. And
okay, everybody. I say thank you so much for joining us again. And yeah, we've had some interesting ins and outs and what have you.
Okay, and so, again, real quick. I mean, if you want to learn more about how we came to the conclusion that these voices are hallucinations, you can get this book on Amazon, or you can get it through Lulu Press. You know, amazing journey through the psychotic mind.
Jerry Marzinsky. Thank you so much, Jerry.
And Sherry Sweeney.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll look up that nurse for you, and I'll get back in touch with you.
That'll be great.
Mace Energy Method. There's a website for it. Try it out. It actually works. www.maceenergymethod.com/about/. There's a list of therapists there from around the world. They can do the session over Zoom. You don't have to go anywhere.
That'll be amazing. I think that, you know, when we have these things available at our fingertips as well, that makes all the difference in the world. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. And okay, everybody, happy Saturday. For me, it's Saturday night. I'm sure the rest of you will enjoy your day, the rest of your weekend. Take care of you all, and God bless you. I'll see you soon.